This is the unrestricted free agent.
He's just going to go out there and kill him.
Wow. Welcome into the program. Glad you're here. And I just pulled my microphone completely off the table.
Oh, I think South Carolina's catching Clemson. I really do. Not what we've seen so far. They haven't closed the gap.
Defense, I'm going to tell you right now, they're nasty. They're going to be nasty all year. You know, I want to repent and apologize. I haven't really seen that.
When you see black and white and you're calling it purple, I got problems with that.
And they'll see, I told you, it's all about the deer talk.
How about that for a start? About that for a start is right. Welcome in. Hope your Thursday morning is off to a good start. A better start than me pushing the buttons there. So much into the show already. I didn't quite have it pulled up how I wanted to. Oh, well, that's what happens, right? Live stuff, the best way to do it. Thank you, Internet, for letting us do some live stuff here. You guys up last night? I was up last night listening. Marcus Satterfield, Clayton White, beat Limbo. Checking out what they had to say, throwing it together for today's show, right? Giving us some content, some material, some great football stuff to discuss. And then this little tweet pops up on the Twitter. Do you guys see this little tweet? Matt Jones, Kentucky Sports Radio. A lot of speculation online, but here's what's real. Will Levis is questionable for the game Saturday. The Kentucky quarterback has a different injury than the finger that got twisted the wrong way, or several wrong ways maybe, in that Ole Miss game. And if you haven't seen it, don't do what I did this morning and search Will Levis injury, because you'll see lots of pictures that you can't unsee. That this new injury isn't long-term serious, but could leave him out. He will be a game-time decision. Kaiya Sheron, I assume is how you pronounce his name, will be the quarterback if he can't go. That is a redshirt freshman, I believe, who has not thrown a pass in football. And with that news that Will Levis might miss the game on Saturday, the Carolina-Kentucky line took a nosedive. Was up as much as 12.5, I think, some places. 6 now is what I'm seeing. At least 10.5 down to 6, what I'm seeing. Carolina-Kentucky, Saturday night. Quite the way to start this morning. DC, first one in on the live chat with a morning Tim. Roger, Sonny, as always. BW just coming in with a morn. Hello, crew from Craig. Anthony with a good morning, UFAs. And Chris on the Facebook live stream. Morning, Tim, fellow Gamecocks. So, what do you guys think now? Remember yesterday? Yesterday was, Craig asked how much he owed for the session. This week has been something for Gamecock fans, where coming off of 2 50-plus point games, first time that's happened since 1995, and yet still not a lot of good feelings. Good juju might be how Marcus Satterfield would say it. He mentioned that in his press conference yesterday. Good juju was, I forget what was the reference there, but something that has been going well for the Gamecocks, obviously. Now, Craig, I want him to play. I'll never quite understand. I guess I get it, right? You don't want the asterisk beside a win with South Carolina. Craig, you're in no position to qualify wins, especially SEC wins on the road at Kentucky. That hasn't happened since 2012. I would say if you want to win the game, you don't want him to play. Oh, dramatic sip of coffee this morning. In a great mood. In a great mood because we got so much going on. Plenty of this stuff to talk about. Plenty to get to from Marcus Satterfield's press conference yesterday. Clayton White as well. I know Pete and them both talked. I didn't find anything extremely relevant to our conversation so it won't be injected him. Roger says 6 now. Wow. Yeah, you got to understand the massive impact here. Like, this is not just unrestricted free agent talk here on the program, which I know gets a lot of national acclaim in the whole thing. The following is just tremendous. The number is overwhelming. But this is a Vegas thing. When it's a Vegas thing, there's a lot to it, right? The boys out in the desert, as Brent Musburger might tell you, guys out in the desert don't change a line by 5 points almost based off of just strictly rumor or not reliable information. DC confidence is still low. We've seen this before. The backup comes in and lights us up. BW right there with you. Backup going to have a Heisman performance like always. Guys, what are we doing here? What are we doing? You're wallowing. Stop it. You're being ridiculous. College football problems aren't problems. Get over yourselves. Not a real thing. Allow yourself to smile and hope. I'm not telling you that South Carolina is absolutely going to beat Kentucky now. What? And I know what you're saying, right? Just because a backup quarterback comes in doesn't mean that the offense is going to get immediately worse, right? Sometimes you see it the opposite. Sometimes the playbook gets narrowed down. They run more of the same play that has been successful, and that doesn't spell a good thing for the defense, especially for a defense like we've seen in the first handful of games. I think it's very fair to say in South Carolina, it doesn't seem to be consistently physical enough to compete with the SEC's elite. Very fair to say. If you've seen something otherwise, please let me know. So I get not being overly optimistic, but looky here. Speaking of hope, good morning, Hope. Coming in with an LOL. Jason says, ridiculous but true. Glad to see you guys are laughing and understand. Greg, the hashtag scar tissue. You're working through it. That's what we're here for. Working through it. But I feel like I'm also here to separate fact from feelings. Feelings from fact. And to try to put anywhere close to a proper perspective on things. It was great news last night for Gamecock fans. Great news. Will Levis is a very good quarterback. Now, is he going to go on to NFL stardom? Is he going to get drafted in the first round like someone predicted? I got no idea. He couldn't do enough to win the game at Ole Miss over the weekend. That's the latest piece of information we have. Now we have this speculation, the reports out there. It's going to be a game time decision on Saturday. It has massively impacted the Vegas line. How much it impacts the game, we got no idea. None. Zero. Roger says, we are no longer hopeless. Okay. Starting off very punny this morning. But a significant night for multiple reasons there. And remember, let's go ahead. You don't have to listen to me yap the entire show this morning. This is what Clayton White had to say about the Kentucky quarterback, Will Levis, yesterday. This was well before any of this information popped out last night, but just kind of the generic overview. How Clayton White sees a guy, this Penn State transfer, who they played against last year. Carolina limited Kentucky's offense. The game was 16-10 at Williams-Brice last year. Here's what defensive coordinator Clayton White had to say about Will Levis yesterday, again, before any kind of news of injury, an injury that could keep him out, as opposed to that injury with the finger on Saturday that we saw just tape it up, get right back in there.
I'm a football guy, so anytime somebody shows improvement on tape, I tip my hat to it. So watching him from last year to this year, he's an improved football player. So that means that I have to respect that as a coach. And just as a human being, he put some work in. He's a better quarterback. He's an NFL-ready quarterback. I think as far as containing someone like that, you have to do a great job of just staying within your game one. You can't try to put so much pressure on yourself to say we have to stop him because he has weapons around him. So I think most importantly, we have to do a great job of understanding his strengths and his weaknesses.
That last part really interesting to me. Now, knowing the possible situation, have to do a really good job understanding Will Levis's strengths and weaknesses. Now, you add another wrinkle in there, right? Not a whole lot of tape on the backup quarterback who could possibly be Kentucky's guy on Saturday. Last night, or maybe even beforehand, I don't know how the news may have gotten to the South Carolina football operations building, but now hearing that only logic and reason tells me that we're figuring out what the strengths and weaknesses are of the backup quarterback now, and are going to have a different type of game plan ready if that is the scenario, right? Interesting. I can only think that adds to the juice that Carolina players have to be taking into this game, right? And maybe it will add some juice to Kentucky. Maybe it'll snap them out of a post-Ole Miss funk as well. Maybe that's the effect it has, a bit of a rallying effect on a team that was hurting. It sounded, just listening to Mark Stoops on Tuesday, it sounded like he was still hurting from a loss. I mean, still processing it and getting over it. It's a big game for them. Kentucky hadn't been ranked in the top 10 very often. They had the opportunity to win on the road against a good SEC team, and they were going to be punny this morning. They dropped the ball. They didn't make it happen. Two turnovers in the final 3 minutes. And part of that, Will Levis' fumble strip sack, the ultimate kind of nail in the coffin there, right? But we all saw the game. Kentucky was at least equal, I think it's fair to say. Most of us, I think, would say they were actually a better team. They just didn't finish at the end. But what would that team look like without that core is where we are this morning. And when you are a road team like Carolina that has had zero success on the road, the last win against a ranked opponent on the road, maybe the last SEC road win. I don't know. I saw this somewhere. I think it's the last road win. No, it's not the last road win. The last one's at Vandy, I think. Didn't see one last year. But you haven't seen a road win against a ranked opponent since that massive upset in 2019. So the current Carolina players have zero track record of success on the road in many ways. They did win at East Carolina last year. There. I'm talking about in the SEC. I'm talking about everything you take with you, right? They beat Charlotte and SC State. They haven't won 3 games in a row. This program hasn't won 3 games in a row in 5 years. So you were taking that with you, but now to inject a little bit of might be getting a break here. That quarterback who your coaches have been telling you is going to the NFL, he might not be playing. That can only kind of gotta perk guys up, right? It has to. It has to. Just human nature-wise, raise your confidence level, I would think, from the Gamecock player standpoint. And I think it's okay to feel that as a thing. All right, I'll see you guys. Thank you for the heads up on the audio. Play a little bit more. Extra preparation could be key. Marcus Satterfield, Clayton White from yesterday.
I think it was huge just to get ahead. Like Friday, we got to I got to spend 5 or 6 hours watching Kentucky, and then Sunday morning when I came in here, I didn't have to watch the game previously and get it graded. We just started on Kentucky, so I mean we we got a nice head start, on our opponent, which you usually don't get. You don't get started on that film until Sunday afternoon when you finish with your guys and wrapping up the previous game from Saturday.
We had the Friday and we had the Sunday, so we gained, I would say, a full whole day of just sitting down, meeting, and watching tape. And it's different when you're able to have game plan thoughts and then watch them play live on TV on a Saturday. So it's give you just a good feel in your head on some things that you need to do, and then you have the Sunday and then the Monday again. So we definitely gained a day and a half of just prep, and it was huge,
All right, how we sounding now? Appreciate the heads up on that. Hope we're loud and clear here. So listening to those guys yesterday, the sentiment echoed by both Marcus Satterfield and Clayton White. And thanks for the heads up there, Chris. Glad we can move full steam ahead now. It's so totally different, again, than listening to Mark Stoops on Tuesday, still getting over what happened over the weekend. It was like a distant memory. The Gamecock coaching staff in a much different place than the Kentucky coaching staff. How much that will translate in the game, no idea, right? And now with this wrinkle about Will Levis, no clue how it will affect things ultimately. But I can only put it in the pro column for the Gamecocks here. There's no way you can diagnose this any other way, right? I mean, we see it every year in college football. It's part of what makes it so intriguing week in and week out. All right, how does this game set up for both teams? What is the feel around both programs? What are they coming off of? What's happened the week before, 2 weeks before? How has this matchup gone before? All of that points in Carolina's direction right now. And you see the line plummet down to 6. Wow. College football, man. You can't make this stuff up. You just can't do it. Clemson dealing with their own drama. A couple players now sued. This is a civil suit, I guess, that came to light yesterday. The incident has been old. You probably heard about it. It was allegedly, I guess, a couple of guys racing in Clemson up to 115 miles an hour. Car accident resulted. One of the Clemson players' car, I guess Fred Davis II, defensive back, ended up flipping over a mail truck. Injuries occurred. Fortunately, not life-threatening, I guess, but now the civil suit is going on. That news coming to light yesterday. And basically Dabo Swinney saying, yeah, we knew this was coming. They got to deal with it. They're lucky that they didn't kill anybody. It's kind of the sentiment that I got from Dabo yesterday. So that's a bit of a distraction, but one that has been anticipated now in the Clemson program. The one that will be more significant on the field on Saturday is that big-time defensive end Brian Brzee out for the second straight game, dealing with a kidney issue. Boston College is the opponent. The spread is massive. So let's try to keep it in proper perspective. I don't think it's going to play a huge factor in the game. What spread's 20.5. Clemson at Boston College. But Clemson certainly is a much better team with Brzee than without him. We'll see how it goes there. So those are some headlines from yesterday. Also, the Braves finish out their season. Marlins getting the better of Atlanta last night. Didn't matter at all, though, in the big picture. 101-61, I think, the final record for Atlanta. First time since 2003 they've gotten to 100 wins. Only won 88 last year in that World Series championship season. And now the playoffs are set. And good for baseball. Hey, you get one day off and let's get back at it. I'll show you how this thing is set up. So again, this is probably more for my information or more for me to keep it straight than anything else. 12 teams have made the playoffs in the big leagues. 4 have gotten byes, right? The top 2 division winners in each league. So in the American League, it's the Yankees and Astros who have the byes. In the National League, it's the Dodgers and the Braves. They don't have to play in this wild card round. Here's who does have to play, just stealing this straight from ESPN.com. The Rays and Guardians will start things off just after noon on Friday. The winner of that best-of-3 series will end up playing the Yankees. The other wild card series in the American League, the Mariners and Blue Jays, the winner of that one will go on to take on the Astros. Phillies and Cardinals in the National League, 2 o'clock on Friday. The Braves get the winner of that one, and the Padres and Mets, the primetime wild card matchup. Winner of that one goes on to take on the Dodgers. And here's how it will set up for the Braves. Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. Games 1 and 2 in Atlanta, best of 5. So this wild card round, best of 3. Division round, best of 5. Then you get to the National League Championship, best of 7. World Series, best of 7. That's the easiest way I can break that down for us today. So it's going to be Phillies or Cardinals for Atlanta in the division round. Best of 5 will start on Tuesday. Games will be on Fox or FS1, just as a heads up. Heads up for those of us who don't have that Bally's mess and don't have to worry about it anymore and can thankfully say, all right, I can watch all the Braves games from now on. That has me excited about this overlap. Best time in sports, in my opinion. College football, NFL, cranking up, really getting serious, and Major League Baseball playoffs. I guess if you're really into basketball as well, about that time when teams are practicing and getting after it too, you got all kinds of stuff going on. All right, let's get back to Carolina, Kentucky. So much to talk about. And what was that, Craig? The last comment. I'd play Tonka Hemingway at Edmund's spot, stand Edmund up, Gilbert Edmund he's talking about, with Johnson and Green as linebackers, Debo or Blanton. So you're saying you'd take him off the line and stand him up back there. Anthony's, are you pulling for Cardinals Braves? It just seems to be a thing, and the Braves certainly have had the Cardinals number postseason wise for the most part, right? I guess it was a few years ago the Cardinals knocked the Braves out. I'm good either way there. Either way, great matchup. I mean, not just I'm not saying for a Braves advantage. I'm saying from an interest and intrigue standpoint. You got Bryce Harper and the Phillies, I'm in. Or you got, to me, the gold standard of National League Baseball is St. Louis Cardinals. I get it. The Dodgers have been better recently. The Braves have been better recently. But I'm just talking baseball town. I would say, I would rank St. Louis number 1 in the country, baseball towns. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I think it was my neighbor is a big Red Sox guy from up that way. And he mentioned how much opposing players like to play in Fenway and the whole thing. And I get that. And I think I would put Boston probably second, but it's such a... Cardinals fans aren't exactly easy on the organization. Was out there for Carolina, Missouri several years ago, and went to a Cardinals game and was talking to a season ticket holder, and Mike Matheny was still the manager at the time. They were talking about the Cardinal way, and they're getting sick of not being as good as they wanted to be. So it's not like it's 100% supportive and rainbows and lollipops, but it is. That the town, the area just thrives on baseball. Not that it doesn't in Boston. It's just a different energy, if that makes sense. I think it's a more appreciative fan base as opposed to if you're not win, you're a bum kind of deal up in Boston, New York, same deal. So I put St. Louis at the top. Yeah, beautiful stadium. The arch there. Just the whole environment, and I mentioned it at the time, but I went to a Cardinals game on Friday night, and then it was the Gamecocks in Missouri on Saturday, and the environment, the energy that I'm used to at Williams-Brice Stadium, most SEC venues, SEC football-like environment, that energy was around the Cardinals game, and a more laid back energy where I'm used to maybe a a Major League Baseball game in Atlanta or just baseball in general. That was more the vibe at Missouri football. It kind of flip-flopped in my head anyway, or from my perspective. Really interesting to see. All right, so let's get into more of this Carolina-Kentucky stuff. Carolina can't win if it plays on Saturday like it's played in the first 5 games. I think it's fair. Maybe we take out the last 2. When the opponent, it's not fair to take out the last 2. I would say even with the last 2 games, blowout wins. It was the third quarter that was really good for Carolina against Charlotte, and it was just a kind of a complete mismatch the entire time against South Carolina State. But I don't think there was anything in there that you watched on Thursday night when Carolina last played and you said, oh yeah, the Gamecocks do that, they're clearly going to be a contender in the SEC, or these next 7 games is going to be a lot better than I thought it would be. I don't think anything really changed your mind from that game, or nothing changed my mind. Let me speak for myself. But Marcus Satterfield starting his press conference yesterday, I think with a comment that kind of sums up where he is right now. Asked to kind of evaluate the last couple of games and 50-plus point performances.
We had success, and we're never going to apologize for that. I think that we were supposed to go out there and produce and score touchdowns, and we knew that going into it, and our guys did it. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. The preparation, it didn't matter if they were playing, the Green Bay Packers or, a middle school team. Like the last 2 weeks, I've just been very pleased with the intent, the urgency, the focus that our leadership on offense has, and just the preparation that they put into both those games.
What do you think? To me, that's a defensive response, right? Reflexively defensive. The question was from David Cloninger, Charleston Post and Courier's first one of the press conference, I think. What do you take out of the last couple of games? Knowing that you scored 50-plus points, but knowing that the level of competition isn't what you're going to see in the last 7 games. To me, and I always go back, I guess I default in my head to the Carolina coach that I covered the most, right? The most years, which is Steve Spurrier, which is probably a ridiculous default, knowing Spurrier being the outlier amongst, well, just people in general, but especially college football coaches. I think he said, yeah, they're all right. Well, they were supposed to. These next 7 games are going to be different. This game on Saturday is going to be different. You got to be a lot better. It's all right. Got to be better. As opposed to what you just heard from Marcus Satterfield. But it makes sense. He's an embattled offensive coordinator. Okay, let's be very clear about it. I was shocked with the bowl game performance last year. I thought before then that Shane Beamer might have to part ways with his offensive coordinator after year 1 because of the lack of performance on the field. Nothing personal. I don't know Marcus Satterfield. I played golf in that little Birdies with Beamer preseason thing last year. Zeb Nolan was the guy in the cart with me. He had lots of good things to say about Marcus Satterfield. They seem to have clicked. Both, he mentioned how they get in early, knock out all their work in the football facility. Very much seem to be on the same page. We've heard Eric Kimry, guy I really respect in more than football ways, speak glowingly about Marcus Satterfield's knowledge, especially. Mentioned how it was a little intimidating how much knowledge Marcus Satterfield had and how he processed it and the whole thing. And coming from a guy who played at Carolina, who has had massive success as a high school coach and made the transition to college and now is back in high school, that holds a lot of water in my mind. But what we just heard really does sum up, I think, what we've heard from Marcus Satterfield and kind of where the offense is, right? why would you reflexively go to, we don't have to apologize, or we're never going to apologize for success? Of course you're not. No one's asking you to. No one's saying you need to apologize for it. It's to me, a strange way to look at it. Like, it's a awfully defensive way to look at it. Like, hey, yeah, we played well, and who are you to question who we played? What do you mean who? We all know Charlotte and South Carolina State are who they are. Yeah, you're supposed to do that. You don't have to. No one's asking you to apologize for it. You could say, I think we could have been better. I think we made some strides. I think we could have been better. We need to continue to get better. I really like the direction we're going. Could say that. Put it that way. Or you could put it how he did it, right? I'm not an embattled offensive coordinator. I've never been there, right? Clearly, Shane Beamer mentioned outside noise and talking heads, and they don't know what they're talking about. Obviously, they're not immune, this coaching staff, to criticism. And from where I sit, they seem to be not highly sensitive to it, but sensitive to it. There's a difference. You can't be highly sensitive to it if you're a coaching staff. To me, I don't think you should be sensitive to it at all. You can't be oblivious to it either. So it's a fine line, right? But when you are answering questions like that to start a press conference, it makes me scratch my head a little bit. Let's put it that way. It seems like you're bringing a lot, like we were talking about with you guys, your Carolina, Kentucky optimism or hope or the whole thing, the scar tissue stuff. It seems like you start with scar tissue. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be that, especially after you score 50-plus points the last couple of games. That's what we needed. That's what we needed around here. We needed to score a bunch of points. We did it. Now we need to keep doing it. And I like the direction we're going in. How about that? You could just say that way. To me, that exudes a lot more confidence as opposed to, hey, we don't need to apologize. Now, that's a significant overanalysis over one comment, right? So let's hear some other comments. I thought it was interesting to hear what these coaches have done on their Saturdays off. Clayton White not really giving us a whole lot. Watched football, did some family stuff. That was about it. Shane Beamer went through the exact itinerary of his day. Woke up, watched College Game Day, then watched some football, then went out on a walk for about an hour with the family, came back, watched some football, got some Mexican food in, went out and built a fire, watched some more football, bed at 11. He went through the whole thing. Well, here's how Marcus Satterfield broke down his rare Saturday off in college football.
I watched every football game known to man. I had a couple buddies invite me to play golf. There was no way in hell I was going to go play golf, so I watched every football game I could. There were some great games on it. The Kentucky Ole Miss game was obviously I had an interest in that because we're getting ready to play them. I thought that was just a great game by both sides. I mean, those guys were it was like a Rocky movie. Both guys, they were both just laying it on the line. So it was fun to sit back and watch other people do well and do poorly, and that wasn't me doing it. So
I think he was trying to be funny at the end. You see the smile? But again, maybe I don't know Marcus Satterfield very well, so I don't. Again, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he was trying to be self-deprecating at the end. Can you imagine if he had answered that a different way and gone a different way? Like, yeah, man, I played golf. Day off, I needed it. Needed Saturday off. I was happy not to be the one getting criticized on a Saturday, so I had a couple beers, made a few birdies. It's a great day. Next question. That energy would have been amazing. And don't get me wrong, Carolina doesn't play well against Kentucky. Completely crushed from the outside, right? 100,000 South Carolina supporters all take to social media at the same time. This guy's playing golf. The offense can't do anything. Get him out of there immediately. You know how much money he's making? So that's why you heard there's no way I was going to be playing golf. Clearly. Got it. Yeah. So dry, DC. No doubt. Adam. Of course, Adam. Are we about to make Kentucky look like their backup quarterback look like Peyton Manning? Greg is coming up with other scenarios, hypothetical answers to that question. What'd you do on Saturday? The fact that the way that he ended there, it wasn't me screwing up. It just gives you a little insight, doesn't it? Get a little window. We get very brief, small windows, I feel like, into what's actually going on in these minds of coaches. And again, so thankful that we actually get to hear from them. It's been fascinating to see. Clayton White's defense has played better than Marcus Satterfield's offense through what? Let's see, 13 games, the +5. So 18 games in to this coaching staff's tenure at Carolina, right? The Shane Beamer era, 18 games in. So it's definitely, it colors how we see both of these guys, right? You come in, your reputation precedes you. Your reputation's based off of how your particular unit is playing, right? The defense has played better for Clayton White than the offense has played for Marcus Satterfield. So I'm thinking, well, that's how I'm hearing this to start. And Clayton White isn't he's not a press conference guy. He's not a look at me. Let's see, I was listening to Sterling Lucas's Cruising with the Coaches thing. Derek Moore was with him. They put that out, I think, yesterday. And he was asked about Clayton White. He said he's a leader of men. I think most leaders of men aren't press conference guys. Most really, really good leaders of men. I'm trying to think the college football example of that. Who would that be? Is that Nick Saban to a large degree? Nick Saban really isn't a press conference guy, right? Bill Belichick's the best football example, right? He is anti-press conference guy. Right? But clearly he's a leader of men. He knows how to lead a football team, an organization. Does it in his own unique way. Clayton White, he's not nearly as curmudgeonly as Bill Belichick, but he's in the range, right? I think if he had his preference, he wouldn't do a press conference. The exact polar opposite of Clayton White's public persona is Pete Lembo, if you listen to all the coordinators yesterday. So that's how I hear these guys to begin with. And Marcus Satterfield is definitely not a press conference guy either. Seems to be a very kind of analytical, dry sense of humor, not going to be overly communicative or explanatory a lot of times because he's thinking way up there. He reminds me of college professors. And not my favorite ones, by the way, that it's difficult to relate to them a lot of times because they're thinking in a different type of realm than a student or someone who is not nearly as schooled up on the subject matter. So interesting then to hear him. This was the most fascinating thing I heard from Marcus Satterfield. I've never been doing this, since 2000, right? 22 years now. I went to my first Carolina game when I was 3 years old, so 40 plus years ago. In all my time of watching football, I've never even heard of the phrase football purist. It's always been a baseball thing to me. But Marcus Satterfield introduced me to the idea of that with this comment yesterday, talking about his perception of Kentucky.
I love watching those guys play on offense and defense. They've recruited. Coach Stoops and his staff have done an unbelievable job of recruiting. You can tell they've recruited to a body type, especially on defense. Their length, athleticism, toughness, football IQ, you can tell. Very, very smart guys, football guys. I think that, they've done a tremendous job. It's just such a tough defense, and they're where they're supposed to be. I know they got out of some gaps with some tempo stuff last week against Ole Miss, but that's a rarity. You go back for years, and they're where they're supposed to be in coverage and fitting the runs, and it's just it's beautiful. If you're a football purist, it's beautiful to watch.
Never heard that in my entire life put that way at the end. Beautiful, like soccer gets the beautiful game moniker, right? Never heard football put that way. I don't even know what a football purist is exactly because there's so many different ways to do it, right? I'm extrapolating from Satterfield there. Sounds to me like it is being very sound in the fundamentals. Whatever, let's see from his perspective. He's watching the Kentucky defense, right? Whatever the offense throws at you, then the defense immediately counters with the counter move and is able to adjust every single time. And then those players, I guess I'm trying to think about this visually in my head as like a chessboard, right? Whatever move is made, then the opposite move, the counter move, you see on the other side. I would think that would be what Marcus Satterfield was trying to communicate there. Never heard that before. Have you guys ever heard that? If you could help me out with that, please. Please do. It's always been a baseball purist thing, right? Where the shift is the DH. Meh. How dare they? Got to manufacture runs. The sacrifice bunt is the way to go, right? That's how you do it. You move station to station. That's good baseball. Fundamentally sound. Catch it with two hands, right? Sorry, this might be getting a little more elementary. I got a coach pitch game tonight. BW. Just aggressive. You still have your media credentials? First of all, that's not a thing. I'm not like, media. It's like, haven't been to the meetings, right? The non-existent, the media meetings. Somebody needs to ask him why the star players aren't getting the football. Well, there was a little bit of that yesterday as well, especially the wide receivers. His breakdown of that, the closest explanation I think you're going to get from Marcus Satterfield right now of distributing the football. Here's what he had to say.
It's good to have as many guys as we can that can make plays. It's all about competition. We'd love to get everybody 10 catches a game, but that's not realistically going to happen. You can't do that. So, whoever practices the best during the week usually gets their hands on the most balls. So I think just the more guys that get in there that can compete and push each other is going to make that room a lot better and make Spencer a lot better.
So I think the question asked of him that time specifically was, what about Corey Rucker and him being able to come back from injury? Where does he kind of fit in? And what I heard was that the more the merrier. But not everybody's going to be happy. It's not realistic that everybody's going to get the ball. So we go off of who's playing the best, who we trust the most in practice, and that's who's going to get the most passes in the game. And yet what we've seen this season, that doesn't quite translate, does it? Like Juice Wells is leading the SEC in receiving through 3 games, and then doesn't get targeted as much. Is because he hadn't practiced well? Is that what you're telling me? That doesn't make any sense. Right? Jaheim Bell touches it double-digit times in game number 1, and then is kind of nullified the next several games. More on Jaheim Bell here, and I think this might help to illuminate us on what we've seen so far from Jaheim Bell, and I think it might be encouraging from the Gamecock perspective about what you might see in the final 7 games. Marcus Satterfield on his talented tight end.
Jaheim has improved. Starting with the Georgia game, I made a comment about he did some things that no one would probably even notice because it wasn't with the ball. You look at that kid at Georgia, Bowers, he does everything. Like you want to slice block, he can do it. You want to lead, he can do it. You want to run this route, he can do it. You want to pass protect, he can do it. So, we've challenged Jaheim, for the last month or so, like in order to be out there and play a lot of plays where they're not just, playing coverage because they know when you're out there you're going to get the ball. You got to improve on these things, and he's done that. And starting again like with the Georgia week, you can see him improving in the run game, blocking, and all those things. And naturally, every time you can get him the ball, it's the chance to score. And, as a play caller, obviously I would love to get him the ball 35 times, but, he's making it easier now because he can do so many different things. It's not just Jaheim's playing in the wing, he's getting the ball. Jaheim's playing the X, he's getting the ball. And so I think we both made a commitment to making sure that he can do a lot of different things, which allow him to open up a lot of different doors of touching the football.
Makes a lot of sense to me. What I ultimately come away from that is, why did this just happen a month ago? Surely you knew that beforehand, right? It shouldn't have taken some frustrating games to make that happen, right? Or watching Brock Bowers in person. Well, to me, maybe the coaching staff didn't just think that was possible at all, or thought it would be better to have different guys do that. I don't know. That's the only confusing part to that. But the rest of it makes a ton of sense, right? Because, and this goes back to my advice. For those of you listening, Craig, listen up. DC, Adam, you're listening right now and you're really salty or you're really frustrated. You are pessimistic about the final 7 games of year 2 of the Shane Beamer era. Please understand that this coaching staff came in dumpster fire and is really tricky, I think, as a college football coach to need to inspire confidence in your players and at the same time hold them accountable for their shortcomings. And so this coaching staff hadn't thrown guys under the bus publicly, right? Steve Spurrier is going to throw you under the bus immediately. He's got a national championship in his pocket and a Heisman Trophy. Question him, right? That was his coaching style. Certainly, I think we got used to that as everyone who followed Gamecock football. Will Muschamp was more of a player's guy when it came to public criticism, that he wasn't going to throw his players under the bus as much unless it got to a certain point. They weren't sticking their face in the fan. I think his players, that inspired massive loyalty within the locker room, players to coach. But clearly the inspiration or motivation, the team building part, the spiritual part of football, that was a disconnect with Muschamp from where I sit. Shane Beamer's got that. He's got that with the fans, the program, the whole thing. I think it's part of why those of you who I called out by name from your comments previously are as salty as you are, because you haven't seen. Adam says, I'm as salty as a pretzel. You haven't seen any positive results on the football field in 2022 off of what you've heard and what you had hoped was building after that bowl game. You haven't seen it, right? It hasn't gone up like that. If it flatlined real quick in that opener against Georgia State, where you can't outrush Georgia State in your season opener. What is wrong? Massive warning sign, right? And it's not like you're throwing the ball over the yard. They outgained you. It's a massive problem. Then you can't compete at all against Georgia. Massive problem. But you got to understand the line that this coaching staff has been walking, inspiring confidence, building a culture that is not a finger-pointing kind of deal, is not just guys hopping in for a year to try to get to the league or thinking, hey, I got to protect my reputation and my body and my future, as opposed to, hey, we got to sacrifice. We got to be a team here. So it's been a tricky balancing act. And I think they walked the line as well as any coaching staff could, knowing they're going to get a bunch of heat too when things don't work out well. You're going to have a bunch of ticked off people who paid a bunch of money in multiple ways watching a subpar product on the field, in their opinion, right? Georgia State game, subpar product. Georgia game, massively subpar. Just 5 games in, though. Just 5 games in to year number 2. 5 games into year number 1, you would have never thought you got what you got at the end of the season. To not take a lesson from that, to not consider that, or even to not assume that's going to happen, I think is a mistake. And then to express your frustration with criticism of coaches and players is just being a bad fan. It's being the opposite of supportive. if you are a supporter of a program, it's not the best way to do it. Craig says, I'm not pessimistic. I think we have about 8 really, really good players on offense and should be really good on that side of the ball. Someone is holding them back. Well, to me, that's just, you're waiting to point a finger then, man. 8 really, really good football players in the SEC doesn't get you squat. If you don't have 8 really, really good players in the SEC, something's horribly wrong. You have to have at least 8 really, really good players. I would say it's got to start with 5 really good players on the front there. And if you don't have 5 really, really good players, you're at an instant disadvantage in the SEC. And that's going to massively impact whatever skill guys you have, wherever you have them. You want to tell me Josh Heupel can figure it out? Tennessee ain't got the best offensive line in the world. You're right. But I will tell you, he's the exception. And Tennessee fans should be thrilled that they got him. And I get it. You might be a little unhappy, dissatisfied that hasn't happened for your program when it has happened for another one that was in a very similar spot. Get it. Fair. But it's like I tell my kids, man, that's not us, right? That family's not, those parents aren't yours. That team's not yours. You got to let it go. Adam, my issue is, when is the last time we had a good offensive coordinator here? Maybe the Spurrier years? Yes, Adam. My issue with you is not appreciating having the best play caller that I've ever seen in college football. I was leaving that part out. And I understand Steve Spurrier didn't reinvent offensive football at South Carolina. He did kind of do that early in his career. And it went pretty well by and large during his time at Carolina. You should demand a good offensive coordinator at your SEC program. Absolutely, you should. But you should not hold Will Muschamp's inability to coach offensive football against Shane Beamer and Marcus Satterfield. That's not fair. And that does no one any good. I understand it happened. I get the feelings, but let's separate fact from feelings, right? The feelings are connected. The facts are they should not be. It's not fair. It does no one any good. I mean, if you thought it would be productive, then I would get that as a fan. But I mean, rationally, logically, reasonably, you got to come to the conclusion, how is that helping? How? Craig, Tennessee walked into a dumpster fire, and 2 years later, they look like a top 10 team. It can be done. They don't have better players than us, so who is it on? Players or coaches or both? Both, Craig. But you got to understand, that's the exception. There are plenty more programs where it's gone the opposite way. And I mentioned those yesterday. Colorado, Arizona State, Arizona, Virginia Tech. Look at those programs. I was just 4 right off the top of my head. Are you telling me that South Carolina, just by birthright or its esteemed place in college football, automatically deserves to be better than those programs? I mean, that's right now. That's reality. That's what those programs are. And just 5 games into year number 2, are you going to qualify the Carolina offense right now as a dumpster fire? Because it's not. Underachieving, I think, is fair to say. But it does no good, I think, to point fingers, to publicly criticize. Only exacerbates a problem. Do you not think Shane Beamer wants to move the football and knows how important it is and is doing everything possible to make sure that happens every single week? I mean, went out and got Spencer Rattler. That's all I need to know about kind of self-evaluation where the Gamecock football program was. Now, if you're had a head coach that said, no, we're not interested in transfers out there, we got the guys. And then those guys go out and do what Carolina has done. That's a much different deal, right? But this coaching staff's not that. And go out to James Madison, Arkansas State. You guys got players. We need players. Come on in. We need weapons on the outside. The more, the better. We need competition at practice. Well, Muschamp left them near nothing on offense. Decimated. And it does this coaching staff no favors to come out and say that publicly, right? None. Nobody's feeling bad for Marcus Satterfield. He comes out and that would be amazing. I would have loved. Can you imagine the public perception if Marcus Satterfield would have done this yesterday? Hey, how'd you spend your Saturday off? I went out and played golf. It's great. Fantastic. Hey, Corey Rucker's coming in. How is he going to affect the wide receiver rotation? Let me tell you something. We need more guys like Corey Rucker. If you're out there right now and you're not playing SEC football and you're a good wide receiver, we need you because we had nothing when I got here. Nothing. Thanks a lot, Will Muschamp. I was set up to have the worst offense in Power 5 football. No, in Division I football. You see our schedule? You see who we played? Do you see we won against Florida and Auburn and North Carolina with that team that we had, with that offense that we had? You guys don't talk about that enough. Let me tell you about it more because we were in the office. We're like, I don't believe what we're seeing. How are these guys doing this? We might be the smartest guys in football. I think there's a lot of that feeling behind what we get on the outside from Shane Beamer and Marcus Satterfield. I think there's a lot of that behind the scenes. I would have just speculating, pure speculation. There's got to be a lot of that feel. Bull hits us up. Good to hear from you, sir. First time today. These are Muschamp's kids, not Beamer's, but look at the offensive line. Beamer was recruited so far. Enough said. Now imagine the self-confidence he had to build up after the roller coaster ride with Muschamp. And Boom's players first year, 7-6. So he's mentioning like how you got to build these guys up, how they were just, they had to be smashed from a confidence standpoint, right? Mike Bobo, much more like Steve Spurrier in his style, I think, than Shane Beamer for sure. Not afraid to throw guys under the bus, not afraid to hold guys accountable, right? Publicly, otherwise. Then they saw him take the job and then a few days later say, see ya. Much better situation over here. And then jumped in another dumpster fire, right? At Auburn. And fired after a year. Like they went through all of that. They've gone through a bunch of different offensive coordinators. It has been a ride for those dudes playing in Gamecock uniforms. Now, they're not all Muschamp kids there, Bull, right? Rattler, Stogner, Rucker, Wells, all immediately Beamer guys. I think that's a good representation of him evaluating talent and saying, no, we need a bunch of other guys because these guys ain't getting it done. I mean, that's nearly every new coaching staff, right? No one comes in and says, oh, this is a great situation. Remember Steve Spurrier? Lou Holtz always wanted to take a bunch of credit. Oh, we left the program and great players. A lot of good, in a great place. A lot of good players left here. Spurrier came in and been like, yeah, there were a few players. Not what he would have preferred. Not up to his standard for sure. Took a long time to get anywhere close. It's year 2. Now, I understand it would be much different if Marcus Satterfield had a different track record. I'm not trying to sell you that Marcus Satterfield is the guy to lead the Gamecock offense to the top of college football or anywhere close. Not trying to sell you on that. I am trying to advise you, if you are a Gamecock supporter, to support and to air out your frustrations in the best way possible. Not on social media, man. It's just not. Recruits look at that stuff. It's not booing at the stadium or leaving at halftime or any of that mess. Go back home. Yell in your car on the way. Teddy, outside of Alabama, Georgia, and Texas A&M. Our recruiting rankings the last 4 to 5 years, similar to Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee, and others. To me, we have the talent to win. We win the next 5 games and host game day on November 19th. You talk about optimism. Troy says, Teddy, I got some beachfront property in Montana to sell you. Real good price. Win the next 5 games. What a run that would be. If that happens, Craig, Adam, DC, I expect all of you to write written letters of apology to Shane Beamer, Marcus Satterfield, maybe Spencer Rattler. Who else would need those? Greg Adkins, the offensive line coach, every offensive lineman. If that were to happen, it would be the most amazing turnaround that I've ever seen in college football. And that's having watched what happened in 2001. The Gamecocks take a 21-game losing streak, turn it into an Outback Bowl victory. Actually, 2000 and 2001, right? 2 in a row. Not a dumpster fire, Chris says, but it seems like someone has the lighter in their hand ready to light it. Chris, no. What? What are you talking about? Morning, gang, York says, weighing in. Good morning, York. We're talking a bunch of Carolina, Kentucky, as you might imagine. Yes, written letter of apology, quill and ink on parchment paper. Got to unravel that thing, send it via Pony Express or get a Raven to drop it off. As we roll into hour number 2 here on Thursday morning, notable day, right? Last night, if you guys weren't up late, if you're not a nerd like me and, let's see what's going on Twitter as I'm listening to coordinators. Such a football nerd. I mean, it's not even a football nerd. That's just a nerd thing, right? A sports nerd thing. Hey, what is this I'm seeing about Will Levis? Yeah, I know he had the injured finger. Is it worse? No, this is a different injury, some sort of mystery injury that no one is giving any details on, and yet Vegas seems to put a lot of stock into it because the Carolina-Kentucky line was at least 10.5 last night. Let's see if I can do it. Down to 6. Will Levis, talented quarterback. You hear Mark Stoops just the other day say, drop back passing game, by far the best it's been since I've been here. Well, Will Levis deserves that credit. That's him saying Will Levis is much better passer than our previous quarterbacks. He can also run the ball. Talented guy. Couldn't quite get it done against Ole Miss. Kentucky kind of still sick over that. Immediate chance to bounce right back against a team that you've beaten consistently at home and on the road in the last 8 years in the Mark Stoops era. Gamecock fans, lots of baggage with Kentucky specifically. Haven't seen their team play up to the preseason overhyped expectations based off of a massive bowl win and an unexpectedly pleasant surprise of a 7-6 season in year number 1 of Shane Beamer. So now, the default from some of you this morning, York, you missed that. Oh, just going to make that backup quarterback look like a Heisman Trophy winner. Good point, Anthony. Got to make sure that letter of apology gets notarized. York says this season is proving preseason predictions are just that. You never know what each week brings. I did check Twitter before bed, and wow. Not sure exactly what you're talking about preseason predictions. Kentucky was supposed to be pretty good, second in the East. They seem to be pretty good. Georgia, outside of that Missouri game, right? Really, really good. So to me, most preseason predictions have come true. South Carolina nationally, outside of in the South Carolina bubble, not expected to be very good. Picked just above Missouri to finish 5th in the East. Missouri got trounced by Kansas State. So if they're thumping that they're a really good team because they just played a sleepwalking Georgia team down to the wire, well, good luck with that. You got an entire SEC season to prove yourself, right? And that's where South Carolina is. 2 tough tests to start the season at Arkansas against Georgia. Those of you who thought Carolina was going to win both of those games are insane people. You're crazy. You're ridiculous. Your relationship with reality, tenuous at best. Right? I don't understand where you're coming from. If you thought Carolina was, or if you hoped Carolina was going to win one of those, I get it. Fair. Right? But you should have acknowledged to yourself that that was a hope, not based in reason and logic and reality and previous production that you've seen. And maybe that Spencer Rattler was going to come in and immediately return to Heisman Trophy favorite type form without having Oklahoma weapons or a system. It didn't make a ton of sense. But now to get to the point, after a couple of 50-point performances against subpar competition, no doubt, that you're the opposite. If you were up really on the emotional roller coaster and have been let down, and you're thinking there's no way Carolina can play well and win games in these last 7, and it's doom and gloom and the whole thing, get over yourself, man. You gotta get over those feelings. Because there is still talent, like Teddy D said. And the same thing that has you frustrated with the Carolina offense should be what you're relying on for optimism moving forward. You're frustrated because there is talent not being utilized or not being maximized. Well, there's talent there. You got a chance. Now it's a matter of actually doing it. When you hear, okay, when you've seen what you've seen, especially to start games in the Shane Beamer era, I get not being overly optimistic. We heard Shane Beamer talk about what goes into scripting plays to start a game. I thought this interaction between offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield, Gamecock Central's Colin Taylor, I believe, interesting yesterday, talking about scripting plays to start a game.
Sat, how many plays do you script to start a game?
10.
10. And when you do that, what are you kind of doing? Is it, hey, let's get our guys in a rhythm and do some things we like. Let's do something unique and see how they defend it. What's the thought process when you're trying to script something?
Trying to get information, and obviously it's plays that have felt good all week because you want to get off to a fast start, and there's usually 1 or 2 shots, to make sure that you get the shot called, because sometimes you'll get within a drive and get in a play calling mindset, and you'll look up and there'll be 20 plays and you've just been dinking and dunking it, trying to get first downs, and you haven't taken that shot. So by scripting a shot or 2 early on, at least it forces you, if you get that far down the script, to get that play call in the game early.
That is fascinating to me. A window into the mindset of Marcus Satterfield, the play caller. I mean, he basically admitted that his play calling mindset can keep him from taking shots down the field. That is a massive difference than a lot of play callers, isn't it? And I think is very fair evidence of some severe criticism that he has gotten as a play caller. Like, man, there are so many other play callers out there, I imagine, that would hear that and say, huh? You have to force yourself to take shots, otherwise you're just going to dink and dunk? That's not how I think about things. It seems to be a very mechanical, very conservative way to call plays, as opposed to, hey, this is what we want to do. We absolutely want to set up shots, and we know we're going to hit them. Right? I feel like that's the best way to call college football games, what you see in a Lincoln Riley offense, for instance. And to tell us that you're going to institute a lot of those concepts coming from Oklahoma, Shane Beamer's last stop, and then to hear that is very interesting. York says, if we beat Kentucky, how many called that? I'm saying what you have going into the season can change. Yeah, with Mo Kaba and Jordan Strawn out, no doubt. Craig says, great. Tell Kentucky we're taking a shot in the first 10 plays. Why wouldn't you do that, Craig? What's the problem there? Especially if that's going to loosen up the defense at all. Give you something underneath that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Brilliant strategy. No, I think that's a really vanilla, generic answer, right? Hey, we script 10 plays. And we definitely have a shot or two on there to make sure that we're going to keep the defense honest. Is that you're just being sarcastic? Okay. All right. But yeah, that's how you get the reputation of being a dink and dunk, swing pass kind of offense. And it's one thing if it works, right? That's why I got absolutely nothing from the Carolina spring game and was underwhelmed at best, is probably the best way to put it, with what I saw in the spring game from Spencer Rattler. It was a lot of just dink and dunk. Maybe a couple throws down the field. You just didn't see it. Didn't see his kind of arm on display or see the offense any kind of different, really. And you say, all right, maybe you just don't want to show much and the whole thing. Maybe the season will be different. Well, there have been some shots down the field, and they haven't worked out great for the most part. I think been better in 2022 than in 2021, but there was really only one way to go. You're going to have to see significant progress in the next 7 games if Carolina is going to be competitive in the 7 games, much less if they're going to win them. So I get where you guys are coming from if you're not overly optimistic. Don't get me wrong. How about improved offensive line play? That has to go hand in hand with improved downfield passing. You got to have some time to get those passes off. Marcus Satterfield on his offensive line at yesterday's press conference.
It's improving. I mean, technique-wise, everything. You start with the Georgia game, no sacks, 1 sack, and no sacks. So the last 3 games, I don't care if we're playing trash cans, we're not giving up sacks, and a lot of that has to do with improvement up front, and a lot of it has to do with Spencer getting the ball out on time. A lot of it has to do with the running backs picking up guys in blitz protection. So, I'm excited about the group, the core guys. We have 7 or 8 guys that can go in and play, and I feel very comfortable with all of them. And they keep just keep getting better and better.
Okay, interesting. I don't care if you're playing trash cans or not giving up sacks. That's a good thing. Kentucky's going to be different, right? They're going to try to get after you. They kind of set their defense, I think, to keep everything in front of them and to get after the quarterback, to make some plays, to turn you over. Defensive kind of centric in a lot of ways. The Mark Stoops mentality. His background, defense for sure. Offensive line must play well for Carolina on Saturday. Craig says, trash can's favored by 6.5. Getting sacked by a trash can, you're in trouble. Yeah, I think that just comes from how football practice gets set up sometimes. They put trash cans out there. I guess that's the thing you have most available a lot of times. Maybe you use it for a quarterback to throw one in there. Another interesting insight into the mind of Marcus Satterfield. So much going into this week in so many ways from the Gamecock perspective. But college football at large. So let's zoom out a little bit. Some other games on Saturday. I think Tennessee fans love they're only a 3-point favorite at LSU. The win over Florida, very significant. That one was at home. Add to that a win at LSU. I understand Brian Kelly, that program, nowhere near that national championship level that we saw a few years ago. The fact that they're number 25 in the country, I think, is a little overhyped. Big comeback win at Auburn. Auburn, not very good. The fact that they were down 17-0. I take more from that than I do really the win. Tennessee can't go and win at a favorable 11 a.m. local kick time in Baton Rouge. I think we alter our opinion of Tennessee a little bit, don't we? You don't go and win at Tennessee this year. When are you going to be able to do that? You got your program rolling, your top 10, your offense is what it is. Hendon Hooker being talked about as a Heisman Trophy candidate. You can't go beat LSU when it looks to me like Jalen Daniels, the most effective offense they have is him running, and he doesn't know how to utilize his really talented receivers or isn't effective at it. Then Tennessee can't call themselves a top 10 team. Top 10 teams go on the road in conference play and beat inferior teams consistently. So this, to me, is really a get-back game. That Florida game, Florida win, was the first step for Josh Heupel in Tennessee. This would be a solid next step to do it on the road against LSU. You don't do that, to me, you're still a work in progress getting back to where you think you can get. You still got a lot to prove. You do this, you've proven a lot, in my mind. How about this one? What kind of Missouri team do we see show up? Vegas doesn't think it's going to be the team that we just saw with the 11-point spread for Florida in the Swamp. What Anthony Richardson are we getting? Massive game for both teams here. To me, this game will be the difference between having a pretty good season and you're digging out from a hole, right? Billy Napier, Florida played well at Tennessee. You can certainly argue it was a sign of progress for the program, being that close in that game. But the reality is Florida hadn't lost that game very often. And you are a double-digit favorite against Mizzou at home. You don't win that game. Boy, the Florida fan base, I think, starts to get restless real quick. That win against then number 7 Utah at home to start the season seems like an ancient memory. If you can't beat Missouri, which clearly is a capable team after what they did with Georgia last week, but also massively inconsistent, or I don't even know how you put them right now. Both those noon games, fascinating. What games are we picking? Yeah, this is another reason why I'm going through it. Craig, we'll decide tomorrow. You figure out what you feel most confident about. Then we'll discuss. We'll come to a consensus, like our buddy Roger put it yesterday. But that's tomorrow. This is Thursday. Just discussing right now. Arkansas and Mississippi State gives us 3 really good noon SEC games. This is a classic example, and this is one that I would feel pretty good about going, give me 8 points in Arkansas to cover that baby. I'm not saying they're necessarily going to win it. I know right now KJ Jefferson is questionable, and that is a huge factor in this game. So with KJ Jefferson, I'm very comfortable taking Arkansas +8. Without him, not nearly as much. But this to me seems to be a classic Mike Leach letdown game where they just looked legit, right? 42-24 last week. Stuck it to Jimbo. Mike Leach, 9-4 against Texas A&M. I thought I was 10-3. It's classic, man. Just start talking about wedding stuff with Alyssa Lang on the field afterwards. That's how tunnel visioned I am. But we've seen it seemingly time after time after time with Mike Leach in his different stops all over the place, that maintaining the momentum can be a problem, and especially after a big win, a letdown, maybe not likely, but a big possibility. And then if Mississippi State's hearing that KJ Jefferson might not play all week, Fives of people waiting with bated breath on our picks. Exactly, Craig. You think Mississippi State's going to light up that secondary? Yeah, that's why it's more than a touchdown favorite. I don't think they're going to have problems scoring points. Massive problems anyway. Yeah, good point, Troy. Good point. You guys are right on. I'm just going with, yeah, man. But there's something to that offense. If it's just had a bunch of success, typically you don't get a really good game the next game. You just don't. Typically. I think that's been the Mike Leach MO. Top 25 opponents consistently, season in, season out. Maybe this team's different. Maybe Will Rogers is just that much better than previous quarterbacks he's had. I don't know. Maybe he's more consistent. We'll see. That Saturday will tell me a lot there. Sounds like you guys are kind of on the opposite mindset than I am, and I get it. That's why I like to go a consensus with our picks. College game day at Kansas. What a world of college football. What a world. Never thought I'd say it in my lifetime. College game day at Kansas. And here we are. Still getting 7 points at home against the TCU team that seems to be pretty similar on paper if you take away the logos, right? Another new game of note for sure. We won't get into it too much more. BW asks, if we beat Kentucky, is South Carolina ranked? I don't think so. I think they get some votes, maybe sitting there 35-ish, but you got to understand, South Carolina's 50-ish right now in college football. The Athletic does their rankings. I didn't even look this week after South Carolina State. You don't get much credit in college football for beating South Carolina State. They were 54 going into that game. It's a long way to go, and Kentucky is pretty highly thought of this year, but they're not Georgia or Alabama that would shoot you just massively way up the rankings, I don't think. And if Kentucky doesn't have their quarterback, I think that gives you even less credit nationally for a win. While if you're a Gamecock fan, you absolutely shouldn't care. You get a win against Kentucky however you can get it. They've won the last 7 out of 8. Yeah, desperate times. Good point, Craig, about the Mississippi State defense. They are very well coached. Believe in them this year. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a big problem with that. I hear you. So what I'm hearing from you guys is absolutely not rejected any type of thought of Mississippi State and Arkansas, or Arkansas +8 against Mississippi State. I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. What about this one? How you guys feeling about a 30-point spread, Georgia and Auburn? Second straight 30-point spread for Georgia. Last week it was on the road at Missouri, and we saw it was the best bet you could have possibly made in college football, taking Missouri in the points. Missouri definitely could have won the game straight up. Got to give Georgia some credit. Didn't panic. Eventually won the game. Avoided disaster. Escaped Como with the win. Well, Kirby Smart couldn't have asked, I don't think, for a better wake-up call in a lot of ways. Kind of Nick Saban, Texas game, very similar. We've seen how Alabama has responded. I expect Georgia to respond. Clearly, Vegas does as well. But 30 is a lot of points, isn't it? To a team in a desperate place like Auburn. It goes one of two ways, right? You rally. You know your coach has got 1 foot in the grave, if not more than that. Or you send him off, right? You're good with cutting the line on that one, and all has been lost in that Brian Harsin regime. That's going to go one of two ways, I feel like. I would be more surprised if Auburn plays Georgia close and covers this thing. I will absolutely not be surprised if we see a bit of what we saw with Georgia, South Carolina. And when Georgia gets it rolling, it is really difficult to stop. The weird thing about what we just saw is that Georgia never got it going. And that has been the exception in the last couple of years instead of the rule. So to see it 2 weeks in a row, no confidence there. Don't know about you guys, but 30 is, yeah, Craig wouldn't touch that game. I hear you. Yeah. Troy, fantastic, right? If you haven't seen the SEC short, the Scared Straight is kind of a takeoff of what Saturday Night Live used to do, but really good. And the buff from Colorado, great appearance. Good stuff, as always, from the SEC short. So we've gotten 2 this week, right? Got the emergency hotline from heaven with Ole Miss and Kentucky featured prominently in that one. And then Scared Straight with Georgia. Pac-12 game, maybe of interest there. UCLA getting points at home against Utah. I possibly like that. Didn't see UCLA absolutely getting a blowout win last week. Would have been a good one to have some money on. What about this one? Only 18 points you got to give. Vandy, if you're Ole Miss, I think I like it. Except Ole Miss is coming off of a very physical game. Tough one. Could have easily lost. Is this one that Vandy actually competes in? Interesting line there. Surprised it's as low as it is. Ole Miss completely blowing out Georgia Tech on the road earlier this year. They can run the football. To me, you have a better chance being consistent as an offense if you're more run heavy than pass heavy. And that might not be the way it breaks down, but that's the way I think of Ole Miss this year for sure. A couple of guys who can really run it. We saw them doing it against Kentucky last week. And it wasn't the transfer from TCU, the more experienced guy. It was the freshman doing it for Ole Miss. Explosive. What about the Clemson line? 20-ish at Boston College. No Brian Brzee that we mentioned earlier. Little distraction from the outside looking in with a civil suit being filed against the 2 guys who were involved in high-speed racing and an accident and now being sued. Dabo Swinney says, yeah, we knew this was coming. They got to deal with it. Boston College completely blown out from the jump against Florida State and then bounced back last week, right? Beat Louisville. Oh, Louisville in a rough spot. Let me check that, by the way. I need to look at what Louisville's done to get thumped by Syracuse to start the season, bounce back, get a good road win against Central Florida. Thought they might get it back on track, but ooh, man, it has been quite the season. There we go. We're get that commercial going on the ESPN.com. Sorry about that. 2-3 overall, 0-3 in the ACC. So somebody's got to get their first ACC win this week. Louisville at Virginia, and Louisville is a field favorite. Tony Elliott and company. I mean, you can't ask for a much better opponent right now when you desperately need to get things going after a loss to Duke. Boston College won that thing at home against Louisville last week by a point. Louisville's other win after Central Florida, it was South Florida in a blowout. So that's why I thought they had kind of righted the ship. At Syracuse to start, you lose 31-7. Really surprising. You go win at Central Florida, kind of right the ship there. Play Florida State at home, lose by 4. Tough game. Florida State's pretty good, though. You can let that one go. Turn around, smash South Florida, which took Florida to the wire in the swamp. Well, clearly that they were kind of gassed after that. But then you go at Boston College. Not only do you lose, but you also lose Malik Cunningham in that game. Let's check on his status. I just see injured right now. Left with an injury. Came back for a couple of series and then ended up, couldn't go back in. Undisclosed injury I'm reading right here. We'll look into it a little bit more. You guys know details there. Let me know. Question I'm reading here. Backup did not play well. So day to day ahead of this one. something to keep an eye on when we're talking about picks there. Louisville, Boston College. Sorry, not Louisville, Boston College. Louisville, Virginia, with Louisville still the favorite there. Quarterback in question. Chris calling Brian Harson's last game at Auburn this week. Certainly a possibility, right? I mean, but I don't know how you fire a guy for being uncompetitive against the defending national champs. I mean, I know how you do it. You just say, see ya. This is not what we signed up for. We wanted you out after last year because we realized our mistake going outside of the SEC over to Boise State. The head scratcher to begin with. Now the power struggle that is Auburn. We've seen enough. See you later. Here's your massive buyout, sir. Go live the good life and try to restore your football reputation somewhere else. Because what are you doing if you're Auburn? Right? I get moving on, but then you're setting the rest of the season up? What, you just completely given up? You'd be 3-3 is all. You do have the really lucky win against Missouri. Mercer and San Jose State were the other wins, but you're going at Ole Miss next. Then it's home to Arkansas, at Mississippi State. Texas A&M is the next run. Like, to me, I think you want to keep that coaching staff intact to try to get at least one or two of those if you possibly can. Because if you fire the head guy, how are you going to even be close in any of those games? And what good are you doing at that point? I think you can get to the end of that SEC stretch on November 12th. With 2 games left, you got the Western Kentucky game before the Iron Bowl. You get there, I think, at this point, if you're with Brian Harsin. You wait until that. And then you still get a jump on anybody else who hasn't fired someone. But with this year's college football climate, where you've already seen a couple of programs cut bait, maybe you feel like you have to do that to be in the mix with anybody you want to talk to early on. I don't know. Nobody really knows, I don't think, what Auburn is going to do, how they're going to handle it, what kind of thought process there may or may not be. Power struggles. It is the definition of a power struggle and a college football program that is built to be just constant drama, right? Year in, year out. To have some success and some really high success, but then be unable to sustain that. What a cluster. That's my big conclusion. So Troy pointed this out as well. Clemson, Carolina, Texas A&M, Alabama, all primetime games on Saturday night. That line is no longer 10.5, by the way. Dropped down to 6 after the Will Levis news coming out. 24, where the line is with Alabama and Texas A&M. Seems massive, but we gave away, 17.5 with Alabama at Arkansas. It worked out for us, even with Bryce Young getting injured this week, day-to-day. Clearly not negatively impacting that line very much. Also, the other big game to watch, I think, Saturday night. This is more for the loser of this game. You can kind of dismiss off into it's a almost instantly disappointing season after a lot of promise. Florida State had cracked the top 25. NC State inside the top 10. One of these teams going to kind of take it on the chin. 2 losses in a row. Which one will it be? Will be fascinating to watch. Chris says, I think if it wasn't Georgia, then maybe they keep him. Isn't that considered a rivalry game for them? Yeah, it's a good point. Yep, it absolutely is. A lot of history there. But what are you gaining just going interim coach for that SEC stretch? I mean, to me, the idea of firing guys and then paying them so much money not to coach is ridiculous. Especially the Wisconsin. The Wisconsin thing, though, does make sense. If you have a guy that you think might be the next coach on the staff and Jim Leonhard, that one makes sense, right? I don't think anybody associated with Auburn football right now would be in line to be Brian Harson's successor with what that cluster has been. So it's a different situation. But again, Auburn is a different animal, man. We all know that. It is just a different deal for sure. How does this thing play out? How do you want this thing to play out? I know Craig said, no, I want him to play. From the South Carolina standpoint, I think if you want to win the football game, you would much prefer Will Levis not play. You would much prefer to play a quarterback who hasn't attempted to pass in college. That's what the redshirt freshman is for Kentucky. Let's look him up, by the way, right? Let's do that. Kentucky football roster. See what we got. Because that's the report out last night. I guess one of you might have seen some kind of lower leg injury. I haven't seen anything. It seems to be on the hush-hush. It wasn't mentioned at all by Mark Stoops. And so maybe it happened in practice. I don't know. They talked about the finger injuries. And, like, how would you be if you just had your finger sideways? Doesn't need surgery is basically what Mark Stoops said about his starting quarterback in Will Levis. But last night, the news coming out of Kentucky that there's another injury, not necessarily serious for a season-ending type deal, but could keep Will Levis out of the game on Saturday night. In Vegas, that line goes to 6 real quick. Kaiya Sheron is how I'm going to pronounce it. Don't know if that's right or not. From Kentucky originally. 3-star guy is what I'm reading right now. Ranked as the number 21 pro-style quarterback in the country by 24/7 Sports. Not overwhelming stats from high school. And let's go to his stats that have happened so far at Kentucky. There are none. Looks like he played in one game this year against Youngstown State. Didn't throw a pass. Yeah, you want that guy. If you're Carolina, you absolutely want that guy. This is a great example, too, of where you got to give the program a little bit of credit for having some depth from the Carolina standpoint, right? Luke Doty is not scaring anyone going into a football game. Don't get me wrong. But I think Carolina fans would feel relatively comfortable if he has to come on in any kind of emergency duty, right? You'd much rather have Spencer Rattler out there. But I think there is at least a comfort level with Luke Doty knowing that he's got some skills back there. He's had some experience. It's a much different situation for Kentucky. Craig says, Auburn's number 55 in recruiting right now. You may need to fire Harsin so you can get a new guy in and let this class not get any worse. Yeah, but how is that going to change here in the next 4 weeks? You're not going to hire anybody before the season's over, right? Or like in the middle of the season, maybe in the last week of the season or something. And that's been part of the line of questioning this week, remembering that the news came down almost immediately after or as the Kentucky game's going on that Carolina is going to hire Shane Beamer. And this was 2 years ago, right? But it was that weird COVID year where you're playing in December and wrapping up the season instead of against Clemson, like usual, against Kentucky. And then Shane Beamer telling about it is pretty entertaining, right? Saying that he's home with COVID, so he can't coach in the Oklahoma game anyway. That's going on. He's got a phone in one hand. He had an IV, I think. He said it was his wife had gotten an IV person. I don't even know what you call it, right? An IV company to come and try to boost his energy or whatever. Was out of quarantine the next day. It was unique situation for Shane Beamer the last time the Gamecocks played in Lexington for sure. Unique situation this week with Kentucky quarterback Will Levis. Will he or won't he play? You got to prepare for both now at Carolina. It's a good problem to have. Craig, at least we aren't Auburn. Yeah, so I mentioned other programs, right, that at least you aren't right now. Virginia Tech, Arizona State, Arizona, Colorado. All pretty good football programs in my lifetime. Little variance there. Auburn, a really good football program. South Carolina in better spots than all of those, for sure. Try to keep that in mind when you're frustrated about the offense. Grass isn't always greener. And Vegas, at least, respects South Carolina's chances to upset Kentucky, especially if Will Levis doesn't play, and knowing the guy behind him, no college experience. It's not like Georgia State's quarterback came in with a big-time reputation, and we saw what Charlotte's first-string quarterback was able to do against the Gamecocks, have some a pretty satisfactory level of success, I would say, would be the way to put it. And then there was a massive decline after he went out. I think, fair to say, a pretty massive drop-off from Will Levis to your redshirt freshman quarterback who hasn't attempted to pass in college. And Carolina's drop-off between Spencer Rattler and its backup quarterback, much smaller gap with what we've seen so far. Now, this guy, again, scarred Gamecock fans have said, oh, this guy's probably going to come on and win the Heisman. We've seen other backup quarterbacks come in and do similar things. Have you recently? I don't think so. TJ Finley is the last real one that sticks out in his Auburn time, right? Or sorry, LSU days. Pre-Auburn transfer. But that was the defending national championship program that had yet to fall completely off the map, or well, I guess was in the process. And that was one of the rare instances where it looked like Ed Orgeron might be able to get a handle back on that program. Didn't happen. Did happen against the Gamecocks. I get why there is scar tissue there. Troy says, does Kentucky still run the Wildcat much? I don't think they do. Certainly not to what Gamecock fans have seen in their nightmares from many years ago. Will Levis can run the ball, so they don't have to. I mean, they've had running quarterbacks in the past too. It's a good question. I think with Chris Rodriguez out, they just hadn't been able to run much at all this year. Yeah, and Chris, I don't know how he's not. Clayton White licking his chops right now. Yeah, possibly getting a redshirt freshman who hadn't attempted a pass. Absolutely. You talk about a defense that's pressured more than any other team in Power 5 so far. The idea of dialing up some blitzes and making a quarterback beat you by being able to recognize where the pressure is coming from, where the hot read is, the whole deal. Oh, that is ideal situation for a defensive coordinator like Clayton White. Speaking of that, it's a good time to play maybe one more time today. We played a little bit earlier, but even if you have heard it, I think worth hearing it again. Clayton White's thoughts on Will Levis. Again, this was before anything had come out yesterday about the possibility of Levis not playing because of an injury that's not that dislocated finger that we saw in the Ole Miss game.
I'm a football guy, so anytime somebody shows improvement on tape, I tip my hat to it. So watching him from last year to this year, he's an improved football player. So that means that I have to respect that as a coach. And just as a human being, he put some work in. He's a better quarterback. He's an NFL-ready quarterback. I think as far as containing someone like that, you have to do a great job of just staying within your game one. You can't try to put so much pressure on yourself to say we have to stop him because he has weapons around him. So I think most importantly, we have to do a great job of understanding his strengths and his weaknesses.
And now extrapolate that to the backup quarterback, right? You don't know any strengths or weaknesses, right? Because you haven't seen a pass in college. So the Kentucky coaching staff has kind of already admitted it's a significant weakness in that he doesn't compare to the starter. So I imagine Plenty has already gone into scouting a backup quarterback in every single game with just how physical these games are and the likelihood of a guy at least missing a play or two being pretty high. You plan on hitting the quarterback, you got to know what you're going to see next, right? So that was already in place, I'm sure, the skeleton of that. And now you just build it way up, I would imagine, when you're Clayton White. You say, all right, here's how we're going to approach quarterback number 1. Here's how we're going to approach quarterback number 2. We go over this every single week, but now we're going to spend a little bit more time on quarterback number 2. We're going to make sure that you know exactly what we're going to do here because, and I'm guessing you wouldn't even say this to the team, but the likelihood of seeing number 2 has skyrocketed with this news. And you're not oblivious to that, and you got to be prepared for it and exploit it if it is reality. Big if, right? Complete speculation. I would think right now, based off of what we've heard, that we'll see Will Levis play or try to play, but we'll also see the backup. That's just my complete speculation right now. And kind of knowing what Will Levis, knowing what we just saw, right? Finger going sideways in that Ole Miss game. Pull it back in, tape it up, good to go. Seems like a pretty tough dude. Pretty difficult guy to keep off the field if there is any way that he can play. Reminds me of the Charlotte situation where we saw a guy who was clearly banged up, but still trying to gut it out as much as possible. Eventually, he couldn't do it. Eventually, Charlotte, I think, was smart enough to know, hey, man, we're going to need him for the rest of the season. We're kind of sacrificing him to the wolves right now that the Gamecock defense had become at that point. Clayton White licking his chops, dialing up the pressure. Kentucky much more well-equipped to keep that pressure at bay, to keep it from becoming just a pin your ears back situation and your quarterback is going to get hit. I don't think we're going to see that if we do see the backup quarterback for Kentucky, but we're going to see Carolina try. It's a great situation for the Gamecock team to find itself in. Not just that you might not have to face the number 1 quarterback, but also what we've already seen in the last several days, more time to prepare, both offensively and defensively. From a coordinator standpoint, it's ideal. Marcus Satterfield and Clayton White not saying that exactly, but they were asked about the extra preparation time, their perspective of it yesterday.
I think it was huge just to get ahead. Like Friday, we got to I got to spend 5 or 6 hours watching Kentucky, and then Sunday morning when I came in here, I didn't have to watch the game previously and get it graded. We just started on Kentucky, so we got a nice head start on our opponent, which you usually don't get. You don't get started on that film until Sunday afternoon when you finish with your guys and wrapping up the previous game from Saturday.
We had the Friday and we had the Sunday, so we gained, I would say, a full whole day of just sitting down, meeting and watching tape. And it's different when you're able to have game plan thoughts and then watch them play live on TV on a Saturday. So it's give you just a good feel in your head on some things that you need to do, and then you have the Sunday and then the Monday again. So we definitely gained a day and a half of just prep, and it was huge,
I don't know what more you would want to hear from your coordinators that could be encouraging from the Gamecock perspective on this thing. And you guys are having a discussion, it looks like, about the Kentucky offense. A good time to bring up the numbers. Again, Chris Rodriguez, first string running back, difference maker kind of guy. First game was last week. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the numbers. But when you do, I was really surprised. Yards per rush, 2.5 from Kentucky. They've run the ball 10 more times than the Gamecocks, and on the season I'm talking about, and had very little success. These were the numbers that you saw from Carolina before the 2 get-right games. So then my brain goes, oh, all right. Well, maybe Kentucky's played a tougher schedule in their first 5 games than South Carolina has. That's not what this says necessarily. I guess tougher would be fair, but not notably. Miami of Ohio, Youngstown State, Northern Illinois, all at home. I guess probably strength of schedule-wise, that's a little bit better than Georgia State, Charlotte, and South Carolina State, but not a whole lot. So I think very similar. At Florida, at Ole Miss, both SEC games on the road, more difficult than having one at home. But when that one game at home was against the defending national champs, you're playing at a Florida program that just their first SEC game under a new coach. They were coming off a big-time win. You got to give Kentucky credit for winning that game for sure. And you know they were in position to win the game at Ole Miss. Kentucky has played better through 5 games, no doubt, proven they're a better team than South Carolina. But the numbers, offensively, sorry, that's the series numbers that Carolina fans you don't want to see. The offensive numbers haven't been overly impressive, and especially seeing that the strength is throwing the football. You don't have there's now the distinct possibility that you don't have that guy. You can see why Vegas sent that line plummeting last night. Down to 6. I think that the numbers, again, bode well for South Carolina here. We always talk about matchups. Again, why I didn't think South Carolina would be anything other than 3-2 at this point. Because of what Arkansas was, that matchup, not a good one for the Gamecocks. Didn't turn out great. At 21-16, when it got there, yeah, I thought it was a real possibility that I would be proven wrong on that matchup. Arkansas, really, they just couldn't stop them from there on out. And it proved to be not a good matchup for Carolina. This thing's different. This Kentucky team has not proven it can run the football against those 5 opponents. That's a massive problem. Now, you possibly throw in the mix that you're not going to have your quarterback that can throw the ball, that is the best, according to Mark Stoops, by far, drop back passing game that they've had in his tenure. You got to go to a guy who hadn't thrown a pass in college. Chris says they got to go back to his high school film, LOL. No LOL there. They're absolutely doing that right now. And then he goes, conspiracy theory on us. Maybe it's just a ploy by Stoops to get us to practice and waste time on it. Vegas doesn't do ploys, Chris. I don't think Vegas gets fooled very often by fake injury news. So you can have the conspiracy theory, get that. I understand. I think you got to go to Vegas, right? And kind of unfortunately, from a Gamecock perspective, you can see how Vegas doesn't care much about the optimistic Gamecock outlook on 2022 when they put the over-under of wins at what, 5.5, 6, somewhere in there. It wasn't an optimistic outlook on Gamecock football in 2022. And if you thought it was going to be a 2022, you had the opportunity to go season win total over-under and put your money where your mouth is. And now, especially if Will Levis doesn't play, it's a tremendous opportunity for Carolina to rewrite this 2022 narrative real quick. Winning on the road in the SEC has been near non-existent for this Gamecock football program in the last handful of years. Near non-existent. You can't call yourself what Shane Beamer's already called this team, right? A good SEC team. You're not a good SEC team if you can't win on the road. And to me, Carolina took the first step to doing that by competing on the road this year at Arkansas. I told you guys that Monday afterwards, right? I viewed that as a positive step in the program. I get it, no moral victories, but you can't evaluate progress in a program without winning a football game. Florida, very similar type take, I think. They didn't win at Tennessee, but they were right there. And for Billy Napier, as a first-year head coach, progress, or certainly a good sign. I think that was very fair. We get that, right? We understand in college football, it's not always what the box score says. The eye test is a big part of college football. It's a big part of why Gamecock fans weren't feeling good about this game Saturday, watching how Kentucky competed at Ole Miss. I think it's very fair to say, oh man, this is going to be a rough game based off of what I've seen from South Carolina and what I'm seeing from Kentucky. But now, knowing that Will Levis might not be playing, knowing that Carolina has had as much preparation as you could possibly ask for this game. Do you feel any differently? Craig, the next 4 teams we play, talking about Carolina, are at or behind ours in total offense. Go get it done. The only really bad matchups to me are Clemson and Tennessee. Yeah, behind us, meaning worse offensive numbers. Guys got to understand the Gamecock offense hasn't been one of the best in the country, but it certainly hasn't been what it was last year either in one of the bottom 25, bottom 30, fair to say. A little bit better than that right now. Total offense is up to 79, I think. Oh, Anthony. I believe, Tim. I believe. Anthony's one of the best fans I've ever seen. I mean, he's a Pittsburgh Pirates fan, for God's sake. So clearly, he gets a lot of credit for being a fan. Loyalty, unquestioned. You can be a Pittsburgh Pirate fan. Look at this. Me too, Anthony. Craig's starting to believe. I think there are a lot of factors, man, in Carolina's favor here. And if you don't believe at all, that's a tough spot to be in as a fan. I think that's something you got to get over. I'm not trying to inspire any kind of like fake bravado or belief for the whole thing. That's not what I do. I'm not here to cheer. I'm a terrible cheerleader. Oh, man. Anthony, Pirates tattoo on me for life. That's another level, man. That is another level. Good for you, sir. I'm just saying, as we sit here on a Thursday morning, could you ask for things to have gone better this week than they are now sitting for your team after last night's news of Will Levis possibly not playing in this game? Roger, enjoyed listening today as always. Have a great Thursday. Weekend is coming. Yeah, we're almost here. We got Thursday night games tonight. Let me check that. I'm pretty slack on checking those these days. We'll go to scores. I haven't seen anything. You guys know of anything, let me know. I didn't know Central Florida was playing last night, though. I guess Hurricane Ian made that happen. I saw Central Florida won. Follow Gus Malzahn on Twitter, of all things. But that's the only way that I saw that. How about tonight? Let's go all. See what we got here. Clearly, no top 25 game tonight. And no game pops up at all. So last night it was Central Florida winning 41-19 against SMU. Big win for that program. John Rice Plumlee, big game. Those are 316, a couple of touchdowns. Yet Friday night football this week, nothing notable at all Thursday night-wise. Let's see what the NFL's got going tonight. I almost knew that one by memory. It is a pretty big game. I remember my kids yapping about it for fantasy football. Colts Broncos, maybe not a big game, but a game. Nothing that's going to make me get overly excited. Watching Matt Ryan play as a Colt will be weird. Russell Wilson as a Bronco. All right, that's something. At Mile High, love watching those games from just an environment, atmosphere. Anthony says, great show today. See everybody tomorrow. Chris, have a good one. Tim, fellow Gamecocks, Tater, Troy, go Cox, Chris leaves us with today. Appreciate all the interaction as always on the live chat. You guys make this show what it is. Tomorrow we'll make our picks. Please bring one with you that you're feeling good, or continue to look at those lines tonight. We'll certainly break down Carolina, Kentucky that much more. Make some predictions there as well. Be a fun Friday show. Really appreciate you guys again being a part of this thing, everything that it is. Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent, October 6th edition in the books. See you guys tomorrow.